possible?
Absolutely, but I'll tell you this. It's not just something that's neutral and we stand by. This is the time to call those Republicans in the Senate, to call those Republicans in the House, and like you said, take the power back to be able to do this. We get enough Senate Republicans, enough House Republicans. We can pull this out now before Donald Trump does even more damage.
They just got their instructions from Professor Warren. Now, you told me you could stick around for one more block because I want to talk about what's happening out in the country as well. We're going to talk about these unbelievable protests we saw all across the country when we have Senator Elizabeth Warren's going to stick around. We'll be back in 60 seconds. Or sure.
Talk about what's happening to them. But they were also there to say, what can we do?
Yeah.
What do we need to do? We got this. Because they were determined. They were ready to fight back. Boy, they were on their feet about tax cuts for billionaires, about taking away support for Social Security and the cuts in the Social Security Administration. They were there to talk about don't take away health care from little babies through Medicaid. Don't take away the promises we made to our veterans through the Veterans Administration. And I'll tell you one that really got them on their feet, and that was don't cut help to our public schools. Whoa, people were fired up.
That's so interesting. I'm happy. It's horrible what's happening in public schools, but I'm happy to hear that people are so tuned into that. Oh,
they were ready. Yeah.
We were just talking, I think sometimes after an election where your party loses, people feel hopeless, they feel powerless. They are not they shouldn't be hopeless, they are not powerless. But these are a reminder out there of the power of people, and Republicans are watching them, right?
That's exactly right. There are a lot of reminders. So one of the things we talked about is I said, call your senator, call your rep. And I said, and before you tell me, oh, I've done that and it didn't do any good, all I have to say to you is Wednesday. It was Wednesday when we saw the first crack in the Republican senators and Trump wall. And that was when those Republicans crossed the aisle on the tariff question. And I said, and the second thing you got to do is you got to get out there and organize. And before you tell me organizing doesn't work, I'll say to you, Tuesday, because it was Tuesday in Wisconsin where good old Elon Musk had shown up with his $25 million in cheese hat and evidently made the election go even stronger for Democrats by doing that. And that was because people organized. And now the heart of it is tell your stories. Get out there and tell your stories. The Republicans want to give tax breaks to billionaires, and they want to pay for it on the backs of your kids and your grandma and your friend down the street who has a disability and your neighbors. You got to tell these stories because remember 2017. You remember. We didn't have control. Democrats did not have control of the House. The Republicans did. Republicans had control of the Senate. And Donald Trump was in the White House, and they were determined to kill health care for tens of millions of people. That bill passed the House easily. They all went off and celebrated. It came to the Senate, and it was people who told stories, who brought their babies, who depend on that health care, who brought in seniors who depend on that health care, told their personal stories in Washington and all across the country. And you remember that night, it came down, we didn't have any more Democrats.
No.
It came down to one vote, and it was when good old John McCain had listened to those stories and voted no and saved health care for tens of millions of Americans. That's the power of what we do together when we speak out, when we organize, and when we tell our stories.
So important. I mean, data, I know we love to nerd out on data.
We do.
But people just telling, here's the impact of Social Security being cut, here's the impact of Medicaid being cut, of my public school being cut. You just have to go out there and tell how it's impacting you personally.
Absolutely right. In fact, I started something just last week called Save Our Schools.
I was just going to ask you about it. Go ahead.
But what I did with it, the whole idea is just to be a kind of gathering place where all the people who are determined we are not going to let Donald Trump and his team cut the Department of Education and cut help for our kids in public school, because we know it's going to mean larger class sizes. It's going to mean kids with special needs are not going to get the help they need. It's going to end our after-school programs. So we're ready to fight back. So last week, I just got this thing started. I want to be able to lift up other voices. And I ask people, send me a story about a teacher who made a difference in your life. And then on Friday, I read them into the Congressional Record.
Oh, I love that.
And the stories about Mrs. P. It was my home ec teacher. It was my history teacher. It was my band teacher. As people told, sometimes just a year or two after they'd had the teacher, sometimes 40 or 50 years later, to say it was that opportunity I got from a good teacher, from a school bus driver who helped out, from a cafeteria lady who was there for me, that helped my life get on a better path and open doors for me. That's the optimism of what we can do together. We can do this. Save our schools.
I love it. People tell your stories out there. We'll try to lift them up. Both of us will. Senator Elizabeth Warren, thank you so much for joining me. We covered quite a range of topics there. Mel Gibson have his gun rights restored. She was fired. And let's just back up for 1 second, because this all began at the end of February, when Liz Oyer was put on a group to restore gun rights to people convicted of crimes. Now, that's an unusual task for someone who typically handles clemency requests. But despite the kind of strange request, her office came up with an initial list of 95 names she considered worthy of consideration. Then that list was passed over to the Office of the Deputy Attorney General, Todd Blanche, who pared down the list to 9. They also asked Oyer to submit a draft memo recommending that those 9 get their gun rights back, which she did. DOJ officials then sent the memo back to Oyer along with a new request. Quote, "We would like you to add Mel Gibson to this memo." Attached to the request was a letter that Gibson's lawyer had sent to senior DOJ officials arguing for his gun rights to be restored. Now, Gibson lost those rights after pleading no contest to a 2011 misdemeanor charge for battering his ex-girlfriend. I don't think I need to spell out the concerns on restoring gun rights to a domestic abuser. They're kind of obvious. But Oyer said that a senior official in Blanche's office told her that Gibson has a personal relationship with President Trump, and that should be a sufficient basis for her to make a recommendation, and that she would be wise to make the recommendation. Liz Oyer wouldn't do it, and so she was fired. On the day she was fired, she got a frantic message from a colleague who told her that there were 2 security officers waiting in her office to deliver termination papers and walk her out of the building. She was in a meeting at the time. She literally walked out of her office and the building with a grocery bag filled with her personal belongings. Since then, Liz Oyer has been vocal about her firing, so vocal that she agreed to be one of the witnesses at a shadow hearing on the Trump administration's attack on the rule of law, led by Congressman Jamie Raskin and Senator Adam Schiff, something the 2 Democratic lawmakers felt they needed to do as congressional Republicans refused to do virtually any oversight whatsoever. Well, Liz Oyer's plan to appear at today's hearing appeared to frighten Trump's DOJ, I guess, and apparently frightened them so much that they tried to stop her from testifying. Before the hearing on Friday night, the Trump Justice Department dispatched 2 armed U.S. Marshals to Liz Oyer's house to deliver a letter from the department warning her about not disclosing anything they claimed was protected by executive privilege. Now, according to a letter from one of Oyer's attorneys, she was able to confirm she received the letter via email before the armed marshals arrived at her home. The letter goes on to say, quote, "This highly unusual step of directing armed law enforcement officers to the home of a former Department of Justice employee who was engaged in no misconduct simply to deliver a letter is both unprecedented and completely inappropriate." And went on, "You appear to be using the department's security resources to intimidate a former employee who is engaged in statutorily protected whistleblower conduct." Despite the Trump administration's warning, Liz Oyer did appear at today's hearing, along with 3 other witnesses who were forced out of the Justice Department. And alongside her former DOJ colleagues, she made it clear that she would not be intimidated and that Americans should be shocked by the Trump administration's flagrant attempt to politicize our justice system.
I am here because I will not be bullied into concealing the ongoing corruption and abuse of power at the Department of Justice. DOJ is entrusted with keeping us safe upholding the rule of law and protecting our civil rights. It is not a personal favor bank for the president.
Liz Oyer is standing by here in studio. Congressman Jamie Raskin, who organized today's hearing, is here as well, and both of them join me next in just a moment. The pardon attorney they fired testifying at a shadow hearing today held by Democrats. That's clear. They wanted to stop Liz Oyer so badly that armed U.S. Marshals almost showed up at her house to deliver a letter, warning her not to reveal information they claim is protected by executive privilege. But Liz Oyer showed up to testify anyways, and she had a lot to say.
My question to you as a pardon attorney at the time, were you consulted on the pardons of the January 6 rioters?
I was not consulted. No member of my office was consulted about those pardons.
What would have happened to the pardon request for January 6 offenders had the normal DOJ pardon process been followed?
Had any of those individuals applied for a pardon, they would have been in due course fully vetted on an individualized basis, and the office would have formed a recommendation about the individual applicants, which would have been provided to the president. The role is to ensure that people who are waiting their turn, who have meritorious cases, that those cases can make their way to the president's desk. Those folks who have access to the White House through the front door, they don't need the help of the Office of the Pardon Attorney to elevate their cause. And there are thousands of ordinary Americans who are seeking the mercy of the president through the clemency process who are not being considered right now because the office is not being consulted.
Joining us now is Liz Oyer. She served in the federal government for 13 years and as a U.S. pardon attorney since 2022 until her firing last month. Also with us is Congressman Jamie Raskin. He's the ranking Democrat on the House Judiciary Committee and helped organize today's shadow hearing. Liz, there's so many things I want to ask you about. I think the pardon power of presidents is something that people don't always understand because there's been a process followed, so I want to get there. But I just want to start first with the fact that this letter was sent. They intended to have 2 armed Special Deputy U.S. Marshals. They were directed to serve the letter to your home between 9 and 10 p.m. on Friday night, which, as I understand it, you had a teenager who was home by themselves. My kids are not that old, but as a mother, I feel a lot of rage on your behalf. But what went through your mind when you learned about that?
Yeah, I mean, my child is a teenager now, but still and always my baby. And I was with my parents who are getting older now. And I had this phone conversation in which I learned that there were law enforcement officers, armed law enforcement officers is the phrase that was used, on their way to my home where my child was home alone. My parents were in the car when I received this news. It was just incredibly upsetting to my entire family. And I feel so thankful that the person who called me to give me a heads up that this was happening did that. Otherwise, my child would have answered the door to 2 armed law enforcement officers at 10 o'clock at night at my home, which would have been terrifying for my entire family and very upsetting. I mean, frankly, just learning that that was in the works was incredibly upsetting.
I find it incredibly upsetting and outrageous. You still testified today, even after that happened. I can't imagine how grateful you are for that. It's very courageous. There are a lot of other people, the others who testified today, there are other people that you want to testify in the future. What can happen to prevent this type of intimidating activity by people in the Trump administration?
Well, I mean, this is why Liz is such a hero to us and the other people who appeared today, because they've all been threatened or intimidated in different ways. They've been fired or they've been forced to resign. And, we've seen that across the spectrum. We saw the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York resign. She'd clerked for Justice Scalia, was a Republican active in the Federalist Society. So we're seeing lots of public officials resign rather than engage in what they see as clearly illegal, unlawful, unethical actions. But courage is contagious. And what impressed me as I was reading everybody's story and listening to them talk was that none of them said that they were never afraid. In fact, all of them experienced fear, but they experienced the fear and then they went on to summon up the courage with the support of people in their families and their friends to go forward. And so people need to understand that courage is not the opposite of fear. Courage is feeling the fear, but deciding to act nonetheless in pursuit of the law and what's right.
Of Americans hit the streets to protest Donald Trump because he's incompetent, he's a dictator, he's a fascist, he makes the worst choices imaginable. And here's a new bad choice that he's making. Trump has planned a $92 million military parade honoring himself for his birthday. I guess he saw the millions of Americans making fun of him all weekend long. So he decided he could never draw that kind of crowd for people that love him. So he has to pay $100 million in a dictator-style military parade to honor himself.
You know who else does this? Kim Jong-un.
Yeah.
Putin. I mean, this guy is a dictator wannabe like I've never seen before. That is so gross. Where is the Department of Government Efficiency when you need it?
You know what? I haven't heard a peep out of Doge lately because I think there's been a big breakup. I think it's heartbreak, hotel, and I think that Elon is so insecure and so diabolical. We're going to start getting some leaks. But in the interim, let's see how Fox Propaganda Network is having their cult deal with the complete global market meltdown that was 100% created by Donald Trump, because the Wall Street Journal, same owner of the Wall Street Journal and Fox News, just a few days before the election said whoever wins will inherit the world's strongest economy. Trump tanks it. So what are they saying on Fox Propaganda?
That this is precisely what Donald Trump said he was going to do, which is always a shock when a politician does that. And it's what he's been saying for literally decades, that this is what needs to be done to save the American economy.
And I'll just bring up this. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, you have to just let him do what he's going to do. Give him some time, because he is a businessman. He's a billionaire. He knows what he's doing. And when does America say, we're tired of paying the most? We're tired of paying and paying and paying and doing what every administration has done. When do we say we're standing up for ourselves and we're going to make free and fair trade? If you're charging us this amount, we're going to charge you that amount.
Okay, the MAGA movement is the biggest battered wives totally I have ever seen in my life. The economy was in the process of going upwards post-COVID. Yes, inflation was a global issue. Biden's economy was starting to take off, and they were handing it over to him. All he had to do was sit, tweet, golf, drink Diet Coke, and put on orange makeup. That's all he had to do for 4 years. But no, he has to bring in dumbass Elon Musk, who rips apart the federal government. And here's the thing. She says he's a businessman. He is a convicted felon that was just on the verge of bankruptcy. There's no question about it. He and Elon Musk both, under massive investigation, they made a mutually assured destruction pact so that they could end the investigations into themselves and ensure that they stayed out of prison. And then when you let morons like this off the hook and you remove accountability, this is now the third world country that Trump used to say on the campaign trail. We're a third world country. Well, it's projection, because that's what he wants. He wants to be that.
Well, he wants to be the star of the third world country. It irritates me to no end when Trump is a billionaire because daddy left him money. Trump is a businessman. He's a terrible businessman. And guess what? The government is not a business. It is the government. These Fox News people, I want to just shake her and say, if Joe Biden or Barack Obama was doing this shit, you would be on life support right now. We would be doing chest compressions because you would be so outraged. So for you to sit here and tell people that are losing their life savings and can no longer retire that it's fine because he's a billionaire and he's a businessman, shut the fuck up.
But that's the myth that they keep perpetuating to the American public. If somebody's smart, if somebody's rich, right, they're smart. If somebody has a lot of money, they're good at business. The purpose of business is to make money. The purpose of government is to keep people safe. The two are not aligned to each other. They're two completely different things. Our dipshit governor here, he always says, we got to start running Oklahoma like it's a business. Well, guess what Oklahoma is? A bottom 10 state. Right. But guess what the governor says all the time? We're a top 10 state. I'm like, no, we're not, dipshit. No, we're not. All right, moving along, we have here Trump's message to his cult. He sent out this tweet today as markets are completely crashing. The United States has a chance to do something that should have been done decades ago. Don't be weak. Don't be stupid. Don't be a panicant. A new party based on weak and stupid people. Be strong, courageous, and patient, and greatness will be the result. Okay, listen up, MAGA. What he's saying is quit being pussies.
Right.
You voted for this. Don't be weak about it. And I will say, they started off that Fox propaganda with, he said he was going to do this. And he did.
He did.
He said he was going to do this. So Ackman, the billionaire, Lutnick, the billionaire, Musk, whose Tesla stock, Limp Dick City, all Bezos, all of these guys, this is what he said he was going to do. And here's the problem with all of your businesses. If the American public doesn't have money, you're not going to have money either, because then we can't buy shit. And I'm no economist, but I think that's a pretty common thing to figure out. But all of these billionaires, Pumps, they were all so short-sighted. And it tells me that they operate with a lot of fear. They immediately feared Trump and rushed to his side, wrote checks for his inauguration, which nobody was going to show up for, so they had to move it inside because he can't draw a big crowd, so he has to hire the military to do a parade for him. But they rushed to his side instead of standing on principle. And let's just look at how this has played out. Target down billions of dollars. Costco up billions of dollars. People like authenticity, people like principle, people like people that give a shit. MAGA is dead. It's just going to take Republicans in the House to grow a spine, because all of this could end.
Right.
And Rupert Murdoch, a special note to you. This country has made you billions of dollars. You could put an email into your news desks to start changing the tune here. MAGA is dead. It is dead. MAGA is dead. It
has a way of being contagious. Yeah. And we are witnessing that, no doubt. But I say this also, my dear friends, courage is also contagious. Courage is also contagious.
Courage is also contagious. That's some good words to live by these days. You may have seen some of those remarks from former Vice President Kamala Harris late last week. You might not have seen is that she posted excerpts of that speech in her very first post on Blue Sky today. So welcome to the Blue Sky Party, Vice President Harris. And while we're on the topic, a quick reminder that you can follow my personal Blue Sky account right now.
Good evening, Jen. I woke up on Sunday morning and two very, very excellent things happened. Number one is that Susan had gotten up way before me, and surprise, for no reason at all, she made waffles, which
Who
was
doesn't
fantastic.
love waffles? Thank you, Susan.
It's the best possible way to wake up. And then she told me the reason she made waffles once I sat down to enjoy is because I hit 1 million followers on Blue Sky. What?
That's a huge moment.
I know. I hadn't even been looking. I had zero idea how many followers I had. Apparently, Susan had been watching. She saw that I hit 1 million. It earned me waffles. It's basically nothing bad can happen now. I've gone on such a high. It's going to last 3 weeks.
I mean, I'm going to tell my husband he's got to make me waffles. I have a long way to go till 1 million, but now I have a goal, and you're starting a trend here. The vice president, former president, they're all joining Blue Sky.
There you got you. And I'll talk to your husband. We'll get the waffles thing straight for when you get to 1 million.
Need the recipe.
I'll be there for you. Thanks, Jen. Appreciate it. And thanks to you at home for joining us this hour. Really, really happy to have you here. So this was not one of the hands-off protests that we saw all over the country this weekend. This was a different thing. And you will see the wind was playing tricks with people.
You mentioned 400 or 500 people. It's probably closer to 750 people, maybe 1,000. It's grown. You can see really, like you said, as it's laid out, as how many people are here marching. You brought your family here today. Why was it important for you all to be here?
Just like I said before, we're all here. This is my nephew, and he's about the same age as that third grader. I wouldn't want to see my nephew in. Oh.
You can see just how windy it is out here. Yeah.
This is Sackett's Harbor, New York. Sackett's Harbor is way up on the shore of Lake Ontario in sort of northwestern New York. It's not that far from the Canadian border. And about a week and a half ago, immigration agents went to Sackett's Harbor, New York, and they took 3 kids and their mom, a 3rd grader, a 10th grader, and 11th grader. 3 kids and their mom, they took them from Sackett's Harbor and they flew them to Texas. And this mom and her 3 kids have been in some kind of immigration prison ever since, yes, including the 3rd grader. The population of Sackett's Harbor, New York is about 1,300 people. But as you saw that local reporter say there were about 1,000 people of the 1,300 people in the town who showed up this Saturday to march in Sackett's Harbor and to demand the return of that mom and her kids. This is from WWNY local channel 7, which covered the march, noting the children were students in the Sackett's Harbor School District. At this rally on Saturday calling for the return of the family, demonstrators carried American flags and signs saying things like, "Hands off our kids," and "Return the children." It was the local Democratic Party in Jefferson County, New York, that organized this rally. We've also seen the Democratic governor of New York, Kathy Hochul, also getting involved in this case. She put out a statement saying she, quote, "cannot think of any public safety justification for ICE agents to rip an innocent family, including a child in the 3rd grade, from their Sackett's Harbor home." She says, quote, "That is not the immigration enforcement promised to the American people. It is just plain cruel. I want this family returned to New York State and believe ICE needs to immediately answer for these actions." The principal at Sackett's Harbor Central School marched in Saturday's rally. She said she was there just representing herself, not representing the school, not representing any union. But she said, quote, "We graduate only about 40 students per year at our school. So we know every face, we know every personality, and we are missing them. And I think what Sackett's Harbor shows," she says, "is that when you rely on your community and you remember that your neighbors love you and your classmates love you and the teachers are going to be there for you, they're always going to stand up and say, 'I will show up for you. I will rally for you.' I think that's how we get through this." She said that again at that march. Again, that was 1,000 people out of a town of 1,300 people. That was on Saturday. And now today, Monday, the school district made this announcement, quote, "We are relieved and grateful to share that after 11 days of uncertainty, our students and their mother are returning home. We remain committed to providing the care, understanding, and sensitivity necessary for all students and staff as we begin the healing process from this traumatic experience. In the midst of this difficult time, the strength, compassion, and resilience of our community have shown through. We are very thankful to everyone who has reached out with kindness and offered support." Wow. If only we all lived in places like this, right? Where people were willing to come out and show up and make themselves heard for us when we needed help. Oh, wait, we do. We do. All over the country, it turns out, we do live in just those places. These are some of the more than 1,400 protests that took place this weekend, protesting the actions of the Trump administration. I mean, this is me showing you 20 of them all at once. I could show you 20 at once for this entire hour, and we still wouldn't get through all of them. If you follow me on Blue Sky, I posted footage from hundreds of different protests that all took place this weekend on Saturday. But just looking at this 20, let me tell you what you're looking at here. Starting at the top, going left to right, and then top to bottom, upper left-hand corner, that's Atlanta, Georgia. Police estimated at least 20,000 people turned out in Atlanta, Georgia. Los Angeles, where the LA Times said the number was easily in the tens of thousands. The crowd may have reached 100,000 in Los Angeles alone. Another huge one in Seattle. Minimum estimates there, maybe 14,000 people. But just keep going. Huntsville, Alabama, Portland, Oregon, Davenport, Iowa, Charlotte, North Carolina, Green Bay, Wisconsin, Lansing, Michigan, Palm Beach, Florida, Phoenix, Arizona had a huge one. Providence, Rhode Island, Salt Lake City, Utah was huge. Austin, Texas, Buffalo, New York, Columbia, South Carolina, Indianapolis, Indiana was massive. Sacramento, California, another huge one. Detroit, Michigan, Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. mean, that's 20 of, again, more than 1,400. Here's 20 more. Again, left to right, top to bottom. Upper left-hand corner, that's Baltimore, Maryland. Then go left to right, across the top, and then we'll go down. Baltimore, Maryland is the upper left, then Pittsburgh, PA, Tampa Bay, Florida, Helena, Montana, Rapid City, South Dakota. Washington, D.C., the crowd was estimated at 100,000 people plus. Chicago, Illinois is next to D.C. there. The crowd estimate there was even larger than it was in Washington. Denver, Colorado, Tulsa, Oklahoma, New York City, where it was said to be easily 100,000 people, Honolulu, Hawaii, Boston, Massachusetts. Local press reports also cited nearly 100,000 people on Boston Common. And I'll tell you, the letters to the editor page today at the Boston Globe is full of people outraged that the Globe didn't give the event better coverage, given how huge it was in Boston. Then we've got Dallas, Texas, Grand Rapids, Michigan, Hartford, Connecticut, St. Paul, Minnesota. That was a massive turnout at St. Paul, Minnesota, at the state capitol. And then the last two there, Savannah, Georgia, and Cincinnati, Ohio. It was cold and rainy enough in Joplin, Missouri, that people put their signs in plastic bags. And if they didn't bring their mittens, they put their socks on their hands to try to keep warm while they held their signs. It rained like the dickens as well in northeast Louisiana, but that wasn't enough to keep people at home. They just held their umbrellas and their signs. In Terre Haute, Indiana, people just made space for all the umbrellas and smiled through it. They hung tough through the rain. In deep red Naples, Florida, organizers there say they had 7,000 people turn out in Naples, Florida. And yeah, that's good weather, so I know, but that's also a county that went for Trump by 33 points in November. And they had 7,000 people turn out on Saturday. Detroit, Michigan, when people came out, they waved across the river to Windsor, Ontario, where protesting Canadians waved right back. People protested in Dillingham, Alaska, on Bristol Bay. People protested at the end of the Iditarod sled dog race in Nome, Alaska. People woke up there Saturday morning to a balmy 0 degrees Fahrenheit, but still, people got out in Nome, Alaska to go say their piece. Look at the people turning out in Chagrin Falls, Ohio. Look at the people turning out in El Paso, Texas. In Pittsfield, Massachusetts, 2,000 people turned out in the drenching rain. Green Bay, Wisconsin had a really big crowd. Look at that. Look at Statesboro, Georgia. So many people turning out in so many red states. Look at this is Gulfport, Mississippi. In Gulfport, Mississippi, they marched with a big Trump sucks banner. Helena, Montana had a really big crowd. So did Knoxville, Tennessee. So did Northwoods, Wisconsin. I don't know if you watched the show on Friday night, but you might remember we had this group of older ladies in New Jersey. It's just a friend group in New Jersey who sent us pictures on Friday of them getting ready to protest this weekend. Again, this is a friend group for which the average age is 90. I've got 2 updates for you on that. First of all, they absolutely did get out and protest this weekend. Again, average age 90 in this group. You see some of them with their wheelchairs and their walkers there. But also, I had guessed on Friday's show that the lady who was making the Dump Trump sign, see on the back of the table there, on the back on the right, I had guessed when we showed this picture on Friday night that the lady making the Dump Trump sign with the legs sticking out of the trash can, I had guessed she must have been an artist or an art teacher. Turns out I was right. She is a retired art teacher. And she, in fact, got out there this weekend with gusto.
I am here to protest Trump's programs. They are hurting us. They are hurting our children. And before long, they will hurt the country. So we have to dump Trump.
You know, the thing I most want to be when I grow up is an old person. And boy, am I getting there fast. But there were a lot of people out there this weekend who are beating me to it. And it was one of the most inspiring things about everything you saw this weekend. On the left side of your screen here, that's Montrose, Colorado. Hands off, one depression was enough. On the right side of your screen, that's Madison, Wisconsin. We 100-year-olds see no future with Trump. On the left side of your screen, that's Harrisonburg, Virginia. Hands off Medicaid. On the right side of your screen, that's Houston, Texas. This old lady is pissed and fighting for our Constitution. In Newtown, Connecticut, 2 canes and a quote from Senator Cory Booker's marathon filibuster this past week. This is a moral moment. In Grand Rapids, Michigan, they had a special protest just for seniors that you see on the left side of your screen there that was separate and apart from the thousands of people who flooded into downtown Grand Rapids for the big protest there. Grand Rapids not big enough to hold just one protest, one for seniors and one for a huge number of people in the downtown. In Flagstaff, Arizona, we had Good Dog, Good Trouble. And in Huntsville, Alabama, and lots of other places, we had Dogs Against Doge. In Los Angeles, we had some signs that made me really strongly want to know the backstory. On the left, you see here, you know times are bad if you partner with your ex-husband to protest. And you know times are bad if you partner with your ex-wife to protest. These two apparently were married for 30 years. They are obviously amicably split up now, but back together this weekend to protest the Trump administration. Also in Los Angeles this weekend, I don't want to know the backstory to I Bite Fascists. Let's just assume that's apocryphal. We saw this, Penguins Against Fascism. This was also Los Angeles. No tariffs, no tyrants, just krill. This is a protest sign we saw several different places this weekend. This is Riverside, California. Honk if you've never drunk texted war plans. We also saw variants of this calling back to one of the ugliest moments in the presidential campaign. They're eating the checks. They're eating the balances. They're devouring our democracy. This was San Jose, California. This was a good one from Newark, Delaware. Do not panic. Organize. A special one there for college campuses and law firms. We saw a lot of signs along this very scary general theme. This was from Washington, D.C. this weekend. Resist like it's 1938. Germany. Also from Washington, don't like surprises? Protect Noah, with the tornado imagery there. This was West Palm Beach, Florida, one of many signs and flags that we saw in support of Ukraine this weekend. These were signs from Atlanta, Georgia, which of course is home to the CDC. Markets down, measles up, fight for America. Hands off my earned Social Security. Hands off disability rights. Also, this one's nice. Mild-mannered church lady against oligarchy. In Honolulu, fascism is bad, says history. I can't sing, but here's one you can sing from Des Moines, Iowa. Supercalifragilisticexpialidocious, POTUS. We believe your fascist dream is something quite atrocious. We'll resist the oligarchs and always work for justice. Supercalifragilisticexpialidocious, POTUS. I cannot tell you how many times I had to practice that. Whew! Let's end the show right now. From a hot daytime protest in Baton Rouge, Louisiana on Saturday. You see on the right there, bad Doge with a squirt bottle with the water in it, off. Bad Doge. And then you see resist the criminal and his little Doge too. In Boston, courage is contagious, with rage colored in on courage. Stand up now or bow down later. Also, Boston rejects tyranny. Fair point there. In Lansing, Michigan, this is the government our founders warned us about. In Novi, Michigan, they had great signs in Novi, Michigan. It's a hard no on being Russia 2.0. And my dad taught me to stand up to bullies. And this is a good one. I'm a really mad scientist. In Tupelo, Mississippi, President Musk must go. And no kings in America. In Omaha, Nebraska, look, they lined both the bridge here, the overpass bridge here, and both sides of the street. You see all the people here in Omaha? And the big sign there, better together. In New York City, let them eat Teslas. Also, some of the many penguins against tariffs, these ones in cute sweaters. In Columbia, South Carolina, we tariffed penguins, but not Russia? This one made me laugh out loud in Avon, Ohio. Thou shalt keep hands off women's health care. Chapter 4, verse 5, Book of Fallopians. In Seattle, only you can prevent fascist liars. We saw this one a bunch on Saturday. I've seen better cabinets at IKEA. And Cheyenne, Wyoming, oh, I love you. Hands off Medicare, Social Security, and Stormy Daniels. The reason I wanted to show all of those signs from these various protests is because some of them were very funny, but also because it shows you just a slice of how many different reasons people participated in these protests, how many different reasons people have to be mad at this administration and to be willing to stand up and protest against this administration. And if you're just thinking about how things are going to go in our country and what this means strategically, what it means baseline, whether or not you protested this weekend, whether or not you're even in sympathy with the people who protested this weekend, the huge variety of reasons people protested this weekend tells you that the proverbial tent of people allied against Donald Trump right now is really, really, really big. He's done enough in these 70, 80, whatever days to make a very large number of people mad at him and want to resist him for a million different reasons. And strategically, for the resistance against Trump, that's good. That's how you get more than 1,400 protests in all 50 states, including not one, but a bunch that hit 100,000 people or more. And in all of these protests, in all 50 states, there was no violence. There was no vandalism. There were no reported arrests of any protesters anywhere. In one town in Indiana, there was one report of one guy arrested who was a bystander, but then they let him go, and that was it. This was just a massive show of American people standing up peacefully saying, no way, nope, we are not having it. And no, we don't know what the direct impact of what these protests will be, what these protests will ultimately do. You almost never see that, right, as a direct consequence of a rally, right? You never know exactly what it's going to do. That said, there is a family that is coming home today to Sackett's Harbor in New York after almost that entire town showed up on Saturday to demand that they be returned. But everyone from Palm Beach Gardens near Trump's golf course in Florida to Anchorage, Alaska, to the huge crowd that turned out in Salem, Oregon, to the big crowd that turned out in Frankfort, Kentucky. I mean, look at this. To the huge crowd that we saw, massive crowd that we saw in Minnesota and St. Paul at the state capitol there. I can tell you one of the consequences of these people turning out in so many places this weekend and in such great numbers, one of the direct consequences we absolutely can measure is that everybody in all of these places knows that if they themselves are upset or worried or mad or scared about what this administration is doing, they know they are not alone. We, the whole country, know that the people are not just taking things lying down. The people are now proving that they will show up and they will do it everywhere. And likely, frequently. This is a point that I haven't heard made all that widely in the wake of these protests. But I think one of the important things strategically about the fact that this wasn't just one big protest in Washington, D.C. this weekend. I mean, it was a very big protest in Washington, D.C. It was over 100,000 people in Washington, which is a big deal. But the fact that it wasn't just Washington, that Washington was just one protest among many, is actually, I think, tactically one of the smart things that the organizers of this weekend's protest did. Because holding disparate protests all over the country, not just one big protest in one place, means that people can do this again and again and again. I mean, you look at really effective protest movements against rising authoritarianism in countries like Poland, where the population essentially rose up and took their democracy back through frequent mass protest. One of the things you realize about mass peaceful protest movements fighting against authoritarian takeover is that they have to stay peaceful and they have to be relentless. They have to frequently protest again and again and again. And it is hard and it is expensive to get yourself to travel to some faraway capital to protest if the protest is always in the capital. But it's not hard or expensive to get yourself to your town square or to the downtown in the city nearest you, or maybe even to your state capital, even if you have to do it time after time after time. And when we have seen it work against rising authoritarians in European countries, and all over the world, frankly, it has been then the protests have been recurrent. And I believe that is what we are about to start seeing in the United States of America, because this was April 5th. But it looks like it's going to happen again in 2 weeks, on April 19th. Saw you there on Saturday. See you there 2 Saturdays from now. Sustainable, repetitive, peaceful, nonviolent, big tent, everyone welcome demonstrations. With, yes, kids there, also dogs, also old people, also righteous indignation and fear and sadness, and also music and funny signs and a determination to outclass, to outlast, and to ultimately put down a would-be authoritarian revolution. Persistence. In Reuters Ipsos polling last week, the proportion of the American public who said they strongly identify with the MAGA movement is 11% of the population. The proportion of the American public who says they do not identify with the MAGA movement at all is 52% of the population. In the Marquette University poll that came out last week, Elon Musk's approval rating is underwater by 17 points. Americans say Trump's tariffs will hurt them rather than help them by a margin of 30 points. Americans say they are against Donald Trump closing the Department of Education by a margin of 30 points. Americans say they are against Trump's threats to annex Canada and make it the 51st state by a margin of 50 points. What Trump is doing and what he most wants to be known for is not popular, is deeply, deeply unpopular. But protesting against him sure looks like it's popular. Expect more of it. We got a lot to get to tonight. We've got the Supreme Court taking action on the bizarre Alien Enemies Act case. There's new fresh hell when it comes to what Trump is doing to Social Security and new fight back against it to talk about. We got a lot to get to tonight. Stay with us.
Being in favor of reining in the tariff authority of the president, or as you said, what should be congressional authority?
Yeah, well, look, what I would hope Senator Thune understands is that the American people don't have space. They don't have runway to see where this goes, because we know where it's going. You know, we know that this is going to be a recession that is placed on the head of Donald Trump for having put us in this position. I mean, again, you know, the idea that this is completely avoidable. We didn't have to end up in this place where we're seeing this much damage. So what I hope Senator Thune does is let us vote. You know, let the people decide. Let us vote as we are as senators to be able to see where our country is going. And I think that that's something that I think people across this country want to see action. They want to see that oversight, and they want to see Trump's tariff tax reversed so that we can go back to trying to stabilize this economy that he has so deeply damaged.
No, he does not seem inclined to do that, but obviously he's facing a lot of pressure, including from within his own conference.
And from the business community. And
Certainly.
I think that that's something that's going to continue to escalate.
I want to ask you about something different, which is that defense sources are telling CNN tonight the Trump administration is in the early stages of planning a military parade. This is something that would take place in June, is the plan to honor the 250th birthday of the Army, but also to commemorate, or it would take place on Trump's 79th birthday. What is your reaction to that?
Look, I mean, with so much going on in the world right now, so much national security crisis that we face, you know, the idea that they're wasting time planning to honor, well, I guess it wouldn't be Trump's birthday per se, but look, we should be doing better. You know, there are ways in which we can honor the anniversaries of our armed services, but I hope that we are able to do that while focusing in on what we should be doing, which is focusing on these national security crises that we face, like what's happening in Ukraine, like what's happening around the world as we're seeing Trump administration taking actions that are empowering and emboldening our adversaries and our competitors right now. That's what we need to focus in on. We'll find time to be able to celebrate the anniversaries of our armed services, of our nation next year. but we need to make sure that we are putting the resources where they need to go.
Senator,
we showed you people protesting outside a federal courthouse in Maryland. That was during a court hearing on the case of a Maryland father, a man named Kilmar Abrego Garcia. He was driving to his mother's house with his nonverbal autistic 5-year-old son in the car with him when he was stopped and arrested. The Trump administration then flew him to a notorious high-security prison in El Salvador, despite a previous court order specifically forbidding them from sending him to that country. He's not known to be a member of this Venezuelan gang that Trump said he wanted to send all the gang members to that prison. He does not have a criminal record. The Trump administration has even admitted that they made a mistake by deporting him to that prison. But even so, they argued that they were under no obligation to get him out and bring him back, nor did they intend to. Well, on Friday, as people protested outside, the judge in that Maryland courthouse ruled against the administration, saying that, in fact, they had to go get Kilmar Abrego Garcia and get him out of that prison and bring him back to the U.S. by 11:59 p.m. Eastern Time tonight, Monday night. Then today, as we got closer and closer to that judge's deadline, the Trump administration went to the Fourth Circuit Federal Appeals Court to try to get the order to return Mr. Abrego Garcia put on hold. The appeals court did not give them what they wanted. Then they tried again. They appealed all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court. Chief Justice John Roberts today did agree to put the looming midnight deadline tonight on hold, pending further action from the Supreme Court. So what that means specifically for right now is that the U.S. government doesn't have to bring Mr. Abrego Garcia back from El Salvador tonight by midnight. Who knows whether they were even trying to do so. Within the last couple of hours, we also got another decision from the Supreme Court on a different case involving the Trump administration flying people to that same prison in El Salvador. This was a case challenging the Trump administration's citation of a wartime power, the Alien Enemies Act, as their justification for flying people to that El Salvador prison. The Trump administration says they are gang members. Whether or not there's any evidence to support those claims, they said that the Alien Enemies Act allows them to send gang members to a foreign prison, even though it's not a wartime. We're not in wartime and we're not at war with that gang, but they've tried to piece it together as their justification for what they did there. Well, tonight in a 5-4 decision, the Supreme Court decided that the Trump administration can fly people to that El Salvador prison using the Alien Enemies Act, but only if it notifies the people who are slated for deportation with enough time for them to challenge their removal in court. I said it was a 5-4 decision. The 3 liberal justices were in the minority here. Justice Amy Coney Barrett sided with the 3 liberal justices in this decision. We're still working out exactly what this will mean for people being deported under that Trump order. In her dissent, though, Justice Sonia Sotomayor made reference to Kilmar Abrego Garcia, writing, quote, "What if the government later determines that it sent one of these detainees to the Salvadoran prison in error? The government takes the position that even when it makes a mistake, it can't retrieve individuals from the Salvadoran prisons to which it has sent them. The implication of the government's position is that not only non-citizens, but also U.S. citizens could be taken off the streets, forced onto planes, and confined to foreign prisons with no opportunity for redress if judicial review is denied unlawfully before removal." Sotomayor says, quote, "History is no stranger to such lawless regimes. But this nation's system of laws is designed to prevent, not enable, their rise." The Supreme Court also has ruled that any challenge to deportations under the Alien Enemies Act has to happen in the U.S. state where the person who's making the challenge is being confined, is being imprisoned. That may mean that the federal court case in Washington, D.C. in this matter is going to have to move to a new federal court in Texas. We shall see. ACLU attorney Lee Gallant, who has been handling this case on behalf of the ACLU, told us this tonight, quote, "We are disappointed that we will need to start the court process over again in a different venue," meaning Texas. "But the critical point is that the court rejected the government's remarkable position that it doesn't even have to give individuals meaningful advance notice to challenge their removal under the Alien Enemies Act." Gallant says, quote, "That is a big victory." Joining us now is Simon Sandoval-Moshenberg. He's the attorney for the man mistakenly deported from Maryland, Kilmar Abrego Garcia. Mr. Sandoval-Moshenberg, thank you so much for joining us tonight. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Good to be here, Rachel.
Let me start by getting your reaction to the Supreme Court's decision in this other case and ask if you have any sense of what it might mean for your client.
So the Alien Enemies Act does not apply to Mr. Abrego Garcia. Right now, it only applies to Venezuelan nationals. Mr. Abrego Garcia, of course, is a Salvadoran national. I'm very worried for many of my Venezuelan clients. I have several clients who've been falsely accused of being members of Tren de Aragua. One because he has a tattoo of baseball and is from the state of Aragua, for example. And they've formally accused him of being a member of that criminal gang. And the only reason they hadn't moved against him was the temporary restraining order entered by Judge Boasberg. So we're very, very concerned with what they're going to do in his case and several other cases as well. But Mr. Abrego Garcia's case is not directly impacted.
In terms of Mr. Abrego Garcia, this has captured the imagination of a lot of people around the country. I watched footage of protests in every state of the country, and I feel like I saw your client's name a lot of times and people referencing his case. It feels profoundly Kafkaesque and almost inexplicable for the administration to be announcing that they mistakenly sent him to this prison and also that they have no plans to get him home. How do you think ultimately that this is going to resolve? What do you think the most likely course is in terms of his case and ultimately his fate?
I mean, I think the case resonates with people's basic sense of fairness. If you mess something up, you have to fix it. The government has at no time claimed that they were correct to deport him to El Salvador. They're just claiming that what's done is done. And they're now under no obligation to fix it, to bring him back, or to even, so much as pick up the phone and make a phone call to try. And that just doesn't make sense to, people in general. And, I think ultimately the Supreme Court is going to agree that that's not the way the laws are structured.
The Trump administration, including the president himself, has mused openly about wanting to send U.S. citizens to this prison in El Salvador. We've had reporting from the Wall Street Journal within the past week that not only does the Trump administration want to continue its relationship with El Salvador in its operation of this prison, which has created this unimaginable situation for all the people who have been sent there, but especially for your client. But the Wall Street Journal is reporting that the administration is looking to create similar arrangements with 6 or 7 other countries around the world, including places like Rwanda, where they want to send people who they don't want to incarcerate here. They want to incarcerate them abroad under the authority of some other country. Do you expect that they're sort of testing the waters with this El Salvador arrangement, but that ultimately they have in mind a larger regime along these lines applying to a larger number of people?
Yeah, I mean, they're the ones who turned this into a national case, right? I mean, this is one guy, father from Maryland, sheet metal worker. They deported by accident. I don't necessarily ascribe, that they did it intentionally. But then they're the ones who decided, once we sort of brought it to their attention, instead of doing what they've done in every other wrongful deportation case I've ever handled, which is just admit error and bring them back, they decided that they were just going to dig in their heels and raise their legal defense to this case is that it would be impossible for them to bring him back. I don't think there's anyone in the United States who actually believes that as a matter of fact. It's so clear, and Trump's comments make even clearer, that we have a contractual agreement with the government of El Salvador vis-a-vis this prison. It's not, we didn't just sort of drop him off in the country and then El Salvador, of their own decision, decided to arrest him and put him in their jail. We deported him directly into the prison.
Simon Sandoval-Moshenberg, attorney for Kilmar Abrego Garcia, ongoing case. We're following it closely, as are so many people in the country. Thank you for helping us understand tonight.
Thank you, Rachel.
All right, more news ahead here tonight. Stay with us.
Things like even Bibi, and this is unrelated because it's a different kind of a relationship, but he started off our conversation today that he's cutting all of the tariffs, he's cutting everything, he's going to get down to a free base, he's going to do things that, in all fairness, other countries, if they said that, would have never even thought about doing it. Now they're offering things to us that we would have never even thought of asking them for because they're experiencing a lot of hurt. And the hurt is that they've taken advantage of us and we finally fought back. Tariffs will make this country very rich. We're rich anyway, but we're rich in a certain way. We have $36 trillion in debt. I want to get rid of it. And we can do it quickly with proper deals. So when Countries don't allow us to sell our product, but we allow them to sell their product. When they charge us massive amounts of money for the privilege of going into their country, those days are over. Okay.
Yeah, go ahead. Me? Sir? Me? Yeah. Thank you, Mr. President. On Iran, 2 questions, please. First, if you can give us more details about where the meeting on Saturday is going to take place.
I can just tell you there's a major meeting going on between us and Iran, and that'll take place on Saturday, and it's at top level.
And the second question about this. A lot of people think that those talks are not going to lead anywhere because the Iranians will never give up their nuclear program. If diplomacy fails, is the United States under your leadership ready to take military action to destroy the Iranian nuclear program and remove this threat?
I think if the talks aren't successful with Iran, I think Iran is going to be in great danger. And I hate to say it, great danger, because they can't have a nuclear weapon. It's not a complicated...
Me neither. Thanks, science. This was one in Seattle. You wanted cheap eggs, but got measles instead. This was in Atlanta. Markets down, measles up. Fight for America. These are just among the many, many amazing signs at the hands-off protests across this country on Saturday. There was a whole subcategory of signs devoted to measles. Welcome back, measles. Because as the United States contends with the worst measles outbreak in this country in decades, President Donald Trump has slashed billions of dollars in federal funding from not just federal, but also local and state health departments. Stick a pin in that. More on that in a second. Trump has also installed as the nation's top health official a man who has made a career out of demonizing vaccines, saying, among other things, that vaccines were causing a, quote, Holocaust in America. Secretary of Health and Human Services, RFK Jr., still an unbelievable phrase. He has in the past praised measles, saying getting measles can be good for you. This weekend, he traveled to the epicenter of our current measles outbreak, traveled to Texas for the funeral of the second unvaccinated child to die of measles there in just the last few weeks. This time it was an 8-year-old girl named Daisy. After her funeral, a social media post from RFK included the line, quote, "The most effective way to prevent the spread of measles is the MMR vaccine." You see that way down there in the post, buried in the middle of the third long paragraph? That is a true statement. That is a scientifically accurate statement. So for a moment there, we were all on the same page. But he couldn't help himself. Just a few hours later, just a few hours after he left the funeral of this 8-year-old girl, RFK Jr. was up with a new post, this time praising 2 Texas doctors for treating measles patients there with quack remedies that are unsupported by any scientific evidence. One of the doctors released a podcast earlier in the outbreak describing mass infection as, quote, God's version of measles immunization. Would God invent a version of measles immunization that killed children? The other one was once disciplined by Texas medical regulators for inappropriate use of certain treatments. Those are the people he's praising right after coming out of the funeral of the unvaccinated 8-year-old girl. But even if you wanted to listen to version 1 of RFK, the guy who earlier in the day did, under his breath, vaguely recommend the measles vaccine, well, even if that was compelling to you, getting the measles vaccine just got a lot harder in Texas because dozens of free measles vaccine clinics have been canceled right in the epicenter of this outbreak because of the Trump administration's huge funding cuts to local health departments. We may be about to find out just how quickly decades of public health success can be undone and at what cost. The epidemiologist and immunologist Dr. Michael Mina wrote this in the New York Times under the headline, quote, "I study measles. I'm terrified we're headed for an epidemic." He said, quote, "Measles is among the most contagious viruses known. A single case can cause dozens more in places where people are unvaccinated. Infants too young for vaccination, immune-compromised people, and the elderly are all at risk. Measles isn't just a fever and a rash. It can cause pneumonia, brain inflammation, permanent disability, and death. The virus can go dormant in the body only to reemerge a decade or so after infection and cause rapid and fatal brain tissue deterioration. Mina says, quote, "This outbreak in Texas may still seem small, but that's exactly how it starts. Each case is a spark, and the fuel is all around us." Dr. Michael Mina joins us here live next. Stay with us.
Against Iran by the U.S. Having said that, though, as with everything from this administration, we get those mixed signals. We have the hawks like Mike Waltz, the somewhat tarred national security advisor, talking about the full dismantlement of Iran's nuclear program. But then we have Steve Witkoff, Donald Trump's presidential envoy, who's talked about some sort of verification mechanism for Iran's nuclear program. Mixed signals as always. Then we also have, talks on Gaza. Donald Trump over the weekend on Air Force One saying that's another thing we'd like to get solved. What does that mean? Is it still Netanyahu's policy of ethnic cleansing and genocide? What will Trump say today? We will have to wait for the press conference. And then we understand another big issue is the increase in tension between Turkey and Israel over Syria. So those are the main topics that we expect to be spoken about.
For now, that is Shihab Ratanzi live from outside the White House. Thank you, Shihab.
Be okay. No, they didn't do that. They'd slap us. The hatred is unbelievable. And the lives, they lived in a pipe, not really a tunnel, it was a pipe. And they always thought they were suffocating, they were going to suffocate. And then they'd open up the pipe and it was like 3.5 feet high. This isn't, we hear tunnel is bad, but pipes are worse. And the stories I heard were incredible. But I just said, was there any sign of potential love or affection? And there were none whatsoever. It was amazing to me. There was nothing like, here, take this, it's a little extra meal or something. They lived like hell. I don't know. They were amazing to me because they seemed to be pretty normal. They weren't scarred, but I guarantee underneath they have to be scarred. And one was there for 356 days. Another was there for about 180 days, a long time. These are people that have been really, really horribly treated.
Trump is doing to healthcare in the United States has become sort of a collection of horror movie headlines that can actually be hard to keep track of day to day because they're not releasing this information in any sort of systematic way. We just have to figure out that, for example, as we learned last week, Donald Trump appears to have fired the doctor who provided him with monoclonal antibody treatments when he had COVID, which may have saved his life. The doctor who may have saved his life, Trump has just fired. The New York Times reported Friday night that Trump has closed the federal lab that tracked drug-resistant gonorrhea in our country. Oh, yeah, why would we want to treat that? Why would we want to track that? Trump has closed the Head Start regional office that serves Idaho, Washington, Alaska, and Oregon. The World Trade Center Health Program for 9/11 first responders. Trump just fired the administrator of the World Trade Center Health Program and nearly all the staff at the National Institute of Occupational Safety and Health, which oversees that program. But for all of that, the thing that I feel like wakes up more Americans in the middle of the night right now, in terms of what Trump's doing on health, is the ongoing, what appears to be mismanagement of this explosive measles outbreak, which we've got centered in Texas. Epidemiologist and immunologist Dr. Michael Mina writes in the New York Times, "We used to think of measles outbreaks in the U.S. as isolated events, short-lived and confined to close-knit communities with low vaccination rates, a flare here, a bubble there. But as those bubbles grow and converge, the U.S. could be at risk for tens of thousands of cases." Dr. Michael Mina joins us now. Sir, thank you very much for making time for us tonight. I appreciate it.
I'm happy to be here.
What is most worrying to you about the way that we are handling this measles epidemic, or this measles outbreak? Forgive me.
Yeah, measles is it's very easy to get to lose control of. Normally when there's an outbreak in an under-vaccinated community, experts go in, usually from the CDC, very quickly and try to get it under control so that it doesn't spread. But what we're seeing now is that we're starting to let it unravel. We're allowing the spread of the virus to begin to become out of control. It's now across multiple contiguous states, which suggests that it's spreading from community to community. And what's happening is that the communities of under-vaccinated have become greater in number, greater in size, which means that as we start to see a case in one community start to spark, it's risking igniting frankly, a nationwide outbreak amongst under-vaccinated individuals across all communities across the United States. And so that is very concerning, given the massive consequences of measles on health, as we're currently seeing in Texas.
When you say that's what we would typically do, that people from the CDC, public health authorities, would come in very quickly and basically pull out all the stops to stop an outbreak like this before it gets larger, what would that look like? What would the right kind of response, public health-wise, to an outbreak of this character have looked like?
Yeah, so firstly, we would focus on the public health approaches. So we would put catch-up campaigns for vaccines in place. We would try to get as many people in the community where the outbreak is happening to get vaccinated as quickly as possible. We would try to get testing. We'd get isolation of individuals who might be exposed or infected and help prevent the spread. We wouldn't necessarily focus our public health efforts on treating critical condition patients. We would try to prevent those patients from becoming patients in the first place and allow the hospitals and the doctors to really focus on treating the patients. But what we've seen is instead we now see a public health administration that is really focused on allowing the spread and then just trying to tackle each case one by one in the hospital. And of course, that leads to consequent pneumonia, ICU visits, and deaths, as we've seen, rather than focusing upstream on the relevant public health measures.
And presumably the federal government has resources to bring to bear here that sort of can't be replicated by any individual state?
Absolutely. The federal government has for years been sort of the beacon of how states respond. States individually rely very heavily on the federal government to help come in and combat outbreaks like this because, generally speaking, it wouldn't be the most efficient for every state to have its own public health crisis management program for something that maybe happens, once in 10 years in a state for something like measles, which should be eliminated. And so the reliance that the states have had on the federal government has been absolutely critical to the public health infrastructure of this country, and that includes both the personnel as well as the funding to go along with that.
Epidemiologist and immunologist, Dr. Michael Mina, thank you so much for your time tonight. It's a scary subject, and your clarity on it is really appreciated. See you again tomorrow and every night this week at 9 p.m. Eastern. In the meantime, you can find me posting prolifically on Blue Sky. I'm there at maddow.msnbc.com. Now it's time for The Last Word with Lawrence O'Donnell. Good evening, Lawrence.
Rachel, did I hear you earlier announcing that you now have 1 million followers on Blue Sky? Where
I do.
Where I am also blue skying, and I gotta have a dozen followers by now. I'm sure.
I'm following you,
I'm
Lawrence,
sure I do. I know you are. That's why I think I must have a dozen by now. Hey, Rachel, I noticed you're not counting the days. When you were discussing where we are in your first segment of the show, I listened attentively when you said, we are 70, 80 days into this Trump presidency thing. Let me help you with that. It's 77. I am counting the days, okay? I am counting them. It is 77,
Listen,
and it is not getting easy.
At the end of 100 days, nothing changes for Donald Trump. My work schedule will change at the end of 100 days, but he's still going to be there as far as I can tell. So I'm trying not to put too much emphasis on that day because it's going to be one of those things where, it's like, I remember somebody telling me once that if you drink warm milk, it helps you go to sleep. So I was like, well, I like milk. That'll be okay. I guess I'll try warm milk. And then you heat up the warm milk to go to sleep. You put it in the microwave or whatever, and it's just milk that tastes warm. Like nothing actually changes. There's no transformation. Nothing will happen to Donald Trump between day 100 and day 101. He'll just get a little warmer in the microwave. So I don't,
Well, I will be here on the 101st day, and I have a feeling that the crashing stock market might still be what we're talking about that night. Just have a funny feeling about
seriously.
it. Yeah, seriously.
Thanks, Lawrence.
Thank you, Rachel. Thank you. And so, as the 77th day of the second Trump presidency comes to a close, we have arrived at a moment that we knew was coming. At some point, it had to come. We have arrived at the Musk versus Trump moment. The world has been wondering how long the bromance could last between the two most volatile and publicly irrational men in the world, Elon Musk and Donald Trump. Donald Trump is the only president in history who hired multiple White House chiefs of staff sequentially, only to end up calling each of them an idiot before and after he fired them. Donald Trump's first Secretary of State called Donald Trump an effing moron. It was documented, well documented by Bob Woodward and others. Said that after Donald Trump left a meeting. And not long after that, Trump's first Secretary of State, Rex Tillerson, was publicly being attacked by Donald Trump after Donald Trump fired him. The publicly much anticipated breakup of Donald Trump and Elon Musk seems to center on the question of when would Donald Trump turn on Elon Musk? That's what everyone was speculating about, because Donald Trump has turned on virtually everyone who's worked for him in the White House. But Elon Musk is the richest person in the world, and there is no one Donald Trump wants to keep in his life more than the richest person in the world, which is why Donald Trump was willing to suffer the public humiliation of Elon Musk publicly taking over a discussion in the Oval Office about Elon Musk's governing policies that left the actual president of the United States having about the same amount to say as Elon Musk's 4-year-old son. We know Donald Trump doesn't ever want to turn against Elon Musk because he never wants to lose access to Elon Musk's money and the fear that that money creates, especially in the Republican Party. As long as Donald Trump has Elon Musk at his side, he can threaten any member of any Republican member of Congress with an Elon Musk-financed campaign against that Republican in the next Republican primary election. And so it has always made more sense that when the break comes, it would be Elon Musk dumping Donald Trump. And now Elon Musk is indeed dumping on Donald Trump, calling Donald Trump's tariffs stupid. So far, Elon Musk is using surrogates to attack Donald Trump, while Elon Musk directly attacks Trump surrogates. Elon Musk showed no gratitude to Joe Biden, while Elon Musk's wealth skyrocketed every day of the Biden presidency. But he's already apparently distressed at losing more money under the Trump presidency than any other person in the world. Tonight, Elon Musk is the individual biggest dollar loser in the world as a result of Donald Trump's world war on economic sanity. And so Elon Musk began his attack on Donald Trump with an attack on Trump surrogate Peter Navarro, the only economic advisor to a president to have served federal prison time, and who is the author of the deranged Trump-Navarro tariffs. Elon Musk tweeted this about Peter Navarro: a PhD in econ from Harvard is a bad thing, not a good thing. Imagine what that means for Donald Trump, who only has a college degree from the University of Pennsylvania, which surely Elon Musk values even less than a PhD from Harvard. Peter Navarro shot back at Elon Musk, calling him a car guy and who just wants, quote, cheap foreign parts, which apparently is some new form of insult in Trump world that claims to be in the business of helping America's car guys, America's auto workers and car manufacturers. But because Donald Trump doesn't understand how his tariffs actually work, the stock market of every American car company is collapsing. Their stock is collapsing, including Elon Musk's car company stock, which collapsed even more today. After a morning of Trump-induced madness in the stock market today, a member of the board of directors of Tesla publicly attacked Donald Trump on Twitter. And you know that wouldn't happen without Elon Musk's approval, especially because that board member's name is Kimball Musk, Elon Musk's brother, and apparently Elon Musk's authorized surrogate at Tesla to publicly attack Donald Trump. Kimball Musk tweeted, "Who would have thought that Trump was actually the most high-tax American president in generations? Through his tariff strategy, Trump has implemented a structural, permanent tax on the American consumer. A tax on consumption also means less consumption, which means less jobs, which in turn leads to less consumption and even less jobs. That cycle of less consumption and less jobs is what we call a recession, which is what Wall Street is now predicting, with Wall Street analysts calling it the coming Trump recession. This weekend, during a video conference with Italy's right-wing League Party, Elon Musk revealed just how dramatically and completely he disagrees with Donald Trump in private, where he apparently claims to urge Donald Trump to drop all tariffs between Europe and North America.
I hope it is agreed that both Europe and the United States should move, ideally, in my view, Euro tariff situation, effectively creating a free trade zone between Europe and North America. That would be that's what I hope occurs. And also more freedom of people to move between Europe and North America, if they wish. If they wish to work in Europe or wish to work in America, they should be allowed to do so, in my view. So that has certainly been my advice to the president.
That has certainly been my advice to the president. All right, then. In other words, Elon Musk's advice to the president is your tariffs are completely wrong. Not that your tariffs are a little too high, but that the tariffs should be zero. That's what Elon Musk said he's telling Donald Trump. That is by far the most dramatic difference in opinion anyone on the Trump team has with Donald Trump. Elon Musk wants zero tariffs, and Donald Trump wants tariffs of more than 100%.
Is it Thursday? I mean, it feels like Thursday already, Eamon, but it's only a couple of hours into Monday. So I want to do a little tariff math, and I know we got Megan Casella waiting as well. So if I'm doing this correctly, okay, and maybe I'm not, we do a 50% additional tariff, punitive tariff on China. So if I layer that on to some of the tariffs that are kicking in, and I know we already have 100% tariffs on electric cars that was put in place by the former President Biden, but on all goods, that, I think, takes us above a 100% tariff, I think.
That's correct. That was CNBC's never-before-frazzled Brian Sullivan, who did an heroic job of trying to keep up with one of the craziest days in Wall Street history today, including the false rumor that jolted the stock market this morning. Shortly after 10 a.m., CNBC's screen flashed what appeared to be good news for the market that was suddenly flying around social media. Donald Trump's economic advisor, Kevin Hassett, was reported on the screen to have said that Donald Trump was considering a 90-day pause in tariffs for all countries except China. And that pushed the stock market straight up like a rocket at 10:17 a.m. There's the green graph on your screen going straight up at 10:17 a.m.
We are just seeing the same headline that you guys are reacting to right now on this 90-day pause in tariffs on all countries except China. We are still trying to confirm this ourselves with the White House, but obviously a major change here, guys, and really different rhetoric, even just from a couple of hours ago from this White House. Navarro, of course, on CNBC saying that this is not a negotiation. And then again, Howard Lutnick, the Commerce Secretary, yesterday was asked point blank whether there would be any postponing, because there was some talk of that over the weekend. And he said absolutely not. It's sort of obvious these have to go into effect while the president resets global trade. The president himself has been saying he won't strike any deals with China and the EU, were the two countries he's been most focused on, or the two trading partners, and saying that there was nothing that they could offer because he wanted to see the trade deficits reduced. So a big shift here. We will have to see if this is confirmed.
And then CNBC's intrepid White House correspondent, Eamon Javers, sent the market crashing back down simply by doing his job as a reporter.
When I asked officials here in the West Wing just, a minute ago whether or not there was any consideration of a 90-day pause, they said they hadn't heard that, they don't know what that is, and they'll get back to me, basically.
All right, well, this
has been an
extraordinary 10 minutes in the market. Well, let's call it about 20 minutes in the market on what may not be actual news, guys.
Minutes later, the grim reality finally set in.
Eamon, really, you calling the White House press secretary and debunking these headlines really sent the markets back down, but because it was not a real headline that turned the market up.
Yeah, in this case, Brian, fake news was fake news.
And there you had a demonstration of just how quickly this problem could be solved. All Wall Street needs to hear is that Donald Trump is going to stop doing what he's doing.
Jeff, what do you make of the market action today?